Hey guys, I'm Elizabeth McCravey, a website designer and business coach for entrepreneurs and your host for the Breakthrough Brand podcast, the show that's all about pulling back the curtain on how to actually build a successful business. I don't skim the surface around here. If you want a deep dive into the nitty-gritty details of what it takes to run a successful business and stand out in a crowd, you're in the right place. After creating a multiple six-figure-a-year website design business in my 20s, I'm ready to share everything I've learned and everything I'm still learning because I believe the keys to building a thriving business should never be a secret. Here you'll find episodes that are actionable, direct, and fun, like friends chatting business over coffee, and a fresh, honest take on the reality of being an entrepreneur. If you're ready to master online marketing, branding, website design, mindset, and business strategy, then this is the podcast for you. It's time to build your breakthrough brand. Let's do this. All right, welcome back to the podcast, you guys. I'm so excited you're here. Today, you're getting to hear a conversation with a copywriter who I've had the pleasure of working with many times now, Emily Conley of Emily Writes Well. And we're chatting all about email copywriting specifically, which I have to say, I love how specific we're able to get in this conversation because I think it's going to help you guys so much, no matter where you are in your email marketing. So right now, if you're someone who's sending a weekly email, or if you've never sent an email ever, for your business, there's going to be something for you here. So Emily is a copywriter and strategist, and she's based in Nashville. Like myself, we actually originally met at a baby shower over a year ago now, and then she ended up buying an M-Shop template, and we connected even more after that. But Emily writes website copy that connects. She writes emails that make effortless sales and sales pages that don't feel overwhelming. And she also teaches virtual assistants and business owners how to write like pros and have a blast in her group coaching and course, the Copy Party Academy. And Emily and I have worked together on emails, on sales pages, and even stuff for this podcast, which you're going to hear us talk about in this interview. And like I said, Emily's also an M-Shop customer. She's the Sophie template, and you'll hear us discuss her experience with the template towards the end of this interview. So definitely stay tuned for that. But we're talking all about email writing specifically. And I really love it because we're getting into major tips about writing emails that get open, clicks, and replies. So getting your emails open first with that subject line and then clicked on and replied to. And we talk about some other nitty-gritty stuff too, like preview text in emails, subject line tips, email formatting tips. Oh my gosh, so many other things. It's really how to tell stories in your emails. I mean, we get into a lot of stuff here. So I think right now, if you're feeling maybe overwhelmed and uninspired in your email copywriting, this episode will leave you feeling like ready to write your next email. And I hope too that you enjoy getting a glimpse into the kind of people I work with in my business. So Emily's someone I worked with, like I said, on quite a few projects, and I don't do it all myself. And she's a great example of one of the amazing people I get to have help me with things like copywriting. And I'm so grateful for her. So get excited. I'm going to let it play now. Here's my interview with my friend and copywriter, Emily Conley. All right, Emily, welcome to the podcast. This is so fun because you're someone who I've personally worked with for a lot of different email projects and copywriting projects. And you're also a listener of this podcast. You're an M-Shop customer and you also live in like the Nashville area. So it's just a lot of things happening. And I know you're like such a wealth of knowledge with copywriting. So I'm just really excited for all the tips you're going to share. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we have all the connection points. I'm super excited to be here. So talking about my favorite subject. So
no, you're so great at it. So to everyone who hasn't met you before, I'd love for you to share who you are, what you do, and who you serve in your business.
Yeah. So my name's Emily. I'm a copywriter. My business is called Emily Writes Well, and I serve coaches and service providers who have passionate, like heart-focused, heart-centered businesses. So it can run, right? The industry isn't really specific, but I love working with women who are passionate about helping other people. So I write website copy, I do email marketing, so sales emails, welcome sequences, all of that good stuff, and sales pages as well.
Love it. What would you say your favorite type of copywriting is to do?
Emails.
Emails. Yeah.
Emails are my favorite. Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. So it's perfect. Another question I have for you, kind of thinking about you being a copywriter, and I know this might be like a longer story, so you can try to give like the shorter version, but like, how did you end up being a copywriter? Have you are you trained in it? Have you just always loved writing? What's the situation?
Yeah. Okay. This is actually a really fun question. So I wanted to be a writer my whole life. I thought that meant like novels or journalism. I went to school for journalism and studied, I did a like minor in creative writing. So I studied it in college, graduated like as the newspaper industry was crashing, closing up. So I ended up teaching and not really using my degree. I mean, sort of, but not super, focused. And then when I was living in Australia a few years later, I had the chance to go back to grad school and do a master's in literature. So it was just writing about books, which sounds super nerdy, but it was amazing. It was literally like a dream come true. Yeah. And then from there, I ended up being like a freelance writer for a wedding magazine in Chicago. And that became, first it was just like a blog here or there. And then I wrote some articles for their print magazine. And then I ended up taking over their blog essentially. And that was really fun. I was like, oh, people can pay me to write. Like, this is what I love doing. And then after I'd done that for a while, I found out the magazine was going to be acquired and I wouldn't have like a freelance position anymore. So I was like, well, I guess I got to go find my own clients. So that's how Emily Writes Well was born. So yes, trained professionally as a writer, but also life circumstances. So kind of a mix of both, I would say.
I love that. I didn't know that you had the journalism degree and going back after. That's really cool. It makes a lot of sense with like everything you do, but I didn't know that. And how long have you had your business? Remind me again.
I freelanced for like a year and a half, and then I started my actual business in August of 2019. So
yes. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Okay, let's talk real quick before we get into so guys, Emily's going to share like her best tips for writing emails, and they're really good. I have a little bit of like notes on them already from her. But first I want to talk about the kinds of like some of the projects we've worked on together, because I think that's fun and interesting. And I personally always love hearing like the stuff that business owners are having help with versus like doing it all themselves. So, I mean, we've worked on emails together primarily. We've worked on the sales page for my course, Booked Out Designer. What else have we worked on? Some more interesting, the podcast stuff. You share about that. I think that's interesting.
Oh, yeah, that is really interesting. That was the first time. So I actually helped Elizabeth like rewrite her intro. So if you think it's awesome, great. So we did that and just like an actual like media bio for you, which you did a lot of the heavy lifting. Those were fun because I got to come in and help polish, which can actually be, I really enjoy that when someone has, a more or less finished product and I can come in and say like, oh, let's just tweak this here and there and make some, what feels like minor changes, but end up providing like a really polished, really solid product. So that's really fun. I loved, and then we did your, some of the email sequences, which have been super fun. So.
And launch. We did Black Friday together last year.
Yeah.
And the Booked Out Designer launch, which only had one of your emails used, which I talked about this and you told me, you were like, I don't know that these will even all get used, because you were like, I think it'll sell out beforehand. But I'm like, let's go ahead and still write 4. And so those are sitting beautifully in ConvertKit as drafts.
Those were good. Maybe we can repurpose them.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking for this upcoming launch.
Yeah. And that was an awesome launch. That was just really fun to like watch happen, since I'd had like a little peek behind the scenes. That was fun.
And I agree with you. It's fun working on so for the podcast intro, to give people some like idea of like different ways working with a copywriter can look. I mean, I had written a new intro for the show and I didn't love it. It was like I had the music ready to go. Like I'd purchased it, I was ready to record it, but just it was like felt like it was missing something. And so I asked you, like, can you spice it up, basically? Yeah. And then you did. And you also did the same thing for the media bio that I'd also written, but was like it was lacking in a lot of ways. And I think that's a really fun thing we've been able to do on those sorts of projects. And the other ones too, where you really have taken it and been like from start to finish running the show. So Very cool. Okay, so let's talk about the topic of crafting emails. They get open, clicks, and replies. Because those are like those three things. Like when I was thinking about like, okay, what are the things we want? We want people to open it first of all. And then we want people to like actually click to the stuff we're talking about. And then like in an amazing world, people respond and say like, I really enjoyed this email. So for listeners who are like, I'm ready to like start writing more powerful emails, maybe they don't feel confident in their copywriting, what tips can you share for writing better emails? I know you have some for sales emails to start with. So let's start with those.
Yeah. So I think sales emails sometimes can feel just so overwhelming and scary. And one thing that I think was so fun working on sales emails with you is that you're just a little like lighthearted about it and don't take it so seriously, which I think is really important. I mean, you take it seriously, obviously, but you're not like scared of the outcome. So I think with sales emails, when you can understand the like basic buyer's journey, you're going to just have a much better email sequence. So starting right, like you start with awareness, you have to inform people. So you don't just start a sales email and say like, here's this offer I have, here's how much it is, here's where you buy it. Like people aren't ready for that yet. So we really want to start with like building the awareness, like, hey, you might have this problem. Did you even know it was a problem? Did you know it mattered? Like, here you go. And then moving into like building the interest, right? So like, why does solving this problem matter? Like, why is this thing so important? What's going to happen if you don't solve this problem? What's possible if you do? So really building that interest. And then you have another email where you're helping people really consider if you're the right person to offer the solution. So that's really answering those questions of like, why this offer? Why are you the person? And why is now the right time? And then giving people a chance to purchase, right? Like having that direct pitch once you have built up all of those other things. I just think that makes sales emails so much less overwhelming, because you don't have to fit it all into one, right? You can string it out in a sequence. You can put it all in one. You can you can play around with it. But really having that basic buyer's journey helps take some of the overwhelm out of it.
Interrupting this episode with a suggestion for the small business owners listening. Ever wonder what you should do for healthcare when you and your spouse are both self-employed, so there's no work-provided health insurance to participate in? Well, when my husband Adam joined me in the entrepreneurial job space over 4 years ago, we joined Christian Healthcare Ministries instead of getting traditional health insurance. And it was the best decision for us, especially in these years of growing and raising a family while also running multiple businesses. CHM is a health cost-sharing ministry and is a faith-based alternative to health insurance. We did tons of research before choosing CHM, and if you know me and Adam, you know we are all about doing the math when making big or small financial decisions. And even though it's not insurance, CHM shares 100% of eligible medical bills, which is more than the typical 70 or 80% of medical bills paid for by insurance companies. All sharing is determined by the CHM guidelines, which you can check out before and after joining. And for the mamas and mamas to be listening, you truly cannot find a better healthcare option for maternity care. I had a vaginal delivery and a C-section and birth center care and hospital care between my 2 pregnancies and births, and it was all 100% shared for. And outside of birth, we've had our share of emergency room visits and procedures as a family, and those costs were all shared by members at Christian Healthcare Ministries, leaving us only paying our monthly contribution. CHM is less expensive month to month than insurance, and because there's no network, you can choose your care with whichever providers best fit your family. I seriously just cannot recommend Christian Healthcare Ministries enough. You've got to check them out. Go to elizabethmccravey.com/CHM for more information. Also putting that link in the show notes, elizabethmccravey.com/CHM. Now back to the episode. Yeah, I love that. And I love the clarity of like the examples even with those. So you would say then that say it's someone's launch week, that like ideally each of those is like its own email, or is there a little bit of each one in each email?
Yeah, so that depends on your strategy, right? So I think if it's a brand new offer and you're emailing a mostly cold audience who's not familiar with you and it's a brand new offer, you may actually have like 2 or 3 emails where you're mostly focusing on building that awareness and interest, because they're not aware of you. But then if it's something like, for example, if you run a sale for the template shop and most of the people on your email list are aware that like, hey, Elizabeth makes these show it templates and they're, somewhat familiar, you could put all of that into one and have one quick email where it's not a new product, it's not a new offer, it's really just a sale. And so we don't have to spend 4 or 5 emails building it out. We could just be like, awareness, there's a sale, interest, you want it. I'm the best, now buy. I mean,
Yeah.
we could be a little bit better.
A little more specific. I love that. Yeah, that makes me think too of like, a great example. I think this is like what you're saying in a sense, but like if you were, say, running, which I do this, I need you to work with me on one of my funnels, honestly, to like rework the main funnel I have, because we haven't worked on that one at all together. But I have Facebook ads that run to freebies that relate to the templates, and then people get put in a sales funnel that is selling them the templates. And that's a great example where like the majority of those people are super cold because they just found an ad and they're like, oh, that sounds like a nice freebie, I'll get it. And that's a great example, I think, of where you'd want all of those really specific steps.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But then if it's, even if it's something that's targeting past buyers, then okay, you really know about me. Like you're already interested in buying. So that would look very different. So I think just having that awareness of the basic buyer's journey, like through the email, and then using that appropriately. So it won't look the same every time, but you can understand your audience and make like just a more strategic email in general.
Okay. Yeah. So awareness, interest, consideration, purchase.
Yeah.
Good things to remember there. Okay. Anything else on that one that you can think of to add?
No, I think just like not being tied to rules. Like so many people come to me and they're like, I want a template. Like, can you just make a sale? Like I want a template. And that can work for some people, but part of what I do, right? And like when we've worked together, it's really been the strategy behind what are we actually, right? Obviously we're trying to get people to buy, but there's a specific strategy, which actually like moves into my second point kind of. But
yeah, we can talk about the second one if you want to go ahead and go to that.
Have a specific goal for each email. So when you have a goal that isn't just like buy, that's the overarching one, right? But maybe for this one email, like the goal is that people understand why you might need a website template, for example. Like that's our goal. So when we know that, then we can really focus in and be specific and not have these emails that just like wander all over the place and kind of like get off track and lose people. They can actually be really strategic and they're going to be a lot more effective that way.
Okay. Yeah. So that makes so much sense of like the underlying goal of the sales email would technically be like, we hope you buy, but like, that's not necessarily what you're saying in your writing. Like you're not saying buy, 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 buy. Here's why you should buy. It's like, yeah, all those other things. So with that, like when you're writing emails for yourself or for clients, like, is that like something you're identifying first before you write the email of like what the goal is?
It is. Yeah. So we'll look at like what the end goal is, who the audience is, determine the number, right? The like rough number of, and this depends on your audience and your offer, but like, okay, we need this number of emails. So if we're going to send 7 emails, what is going to be our goal for each one? And I like to work backwards. So if the end goal, the last email is everybody signs up or everybody buys, what are the questions we have to answer before we can get there, and kind of work backwards that way.
Well, I like the working backwards. I feel like that'd be really helpful. Okay. And that one, so I have another random question with that. Like, how do people know how many emails they should do during a launch week? Like, do you have any tips for that around like the decision making, or is it that big of a decision even? Like, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I have personal thoughts on it. So people will tell you different things. I say that you need to send the number of emails that are necessary to make the sale, which is super helpful, right? Like, okay, cool. But what I mean by that is really like one a day for, 5 days, that's fine. But if you're trying to, I don't know, if you want to send like 2 emails, I don't ever recommend sending 2 emails unless it's a cart closing, like, a reminder. But you kind of just think about those things you like. Like if you're interested in something and someone sent you 3 emails in one day about it, how would you feel about that? Yeah. Probably not great, right? Like that's excessive. So if you have a lot of information to communicate, I recommend lengthening your window and taking some breaks. So I think that's something we did with like your Black Friday sequence. It was 10 days, but we took like 1 or 2 days off.
Yeah. Like we didn't send one on Thanksgiving at all. Yeah, that's a great point. We really did space that out well.
Yeah. Because you want people to be, right? You don't want people to forget, like you want people to be engaged. But I always just say like, imagine this hitting your inbox and like, how do you feel about it? And if it would be annoying or excessive, then probably scale back.
Yeah. And I would say like my thought too, thinking about receiving emails and sending them, if it is 2 in a day, I'd prefer for them to have different purposes and goals, like we're saying, but also wanted them to be a lot shorter. Like you're saying, like with the cart close email, like you've written me some good cart close emails that are like, just like basically just like to the point of like, hey, this is closing. Like, peace out, make a decision. That's it. Like, there's not like that much you have to say. But I think those like work really well to just like get the point across.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, you get to a point where like, if you've done a good job and you've communicated everything you want to tell someone, like there's no need to rehash it, right? At that point, you're like, I know what I have is awesome. I know it'll help you. Like you kind of have to make the decision, right? Like I'm not going to force your hand. And I think people really respond to that of like, oh, it's tough, like they don't feel really like pressured. But when they can sense that energy of like, oh yeah, this is great. Want it or not, like that's up to you. That's when I think people respond to those.
Yeah, I agree. The non-desperate sales energy. I love, I've talked about that a lot in my designer course so far of just how that really like people can feel that of like how you're selling and all that. Okay. I love that one. Okay. So you have some more tips and these are more for like emails in general. So sales emails or content emails too. So what's your third tip?
Yeah. So my third tip is to add value to every single email. I mean, maybe not a cart close. That's actually a good example of one that might not have value, but add value to every single email. Even when it's a sales email, teach someone something, share something that's helpful. It doesn't have to be specifically business related. This is a thing I think, Elizabeth, you do really well is like sharing just things you're enjoying, right? Like, here's a recipe I tried, or like, here's, this fun Amazon find, but where you're giving people a reason to open your email. So you're teaching them a business point, you're giving them advice, you're not asking, right? Just purely like giving and giving them a chance to gain something from it. I just think sometimes we send emails because like we want, I want you to read my blog, but like, that's not a good reason to email somebody. It should be like, I want to teach you something or I want to help you. Not so much like the asking.
I love that. Yeah. I want you to read my blog is not a good reason. And that's like, okay, something too that you made me think of with that. And I have template customers sometimes email us about this, but the question of like, how can I get like whenever I publish a new blog post for it to automatically email my list that there's a new blog post. And I always just say like, there is ways you can set that up with WordPress and plugins also like you can definitely do that, but don't do it. Like that's not the way you want to do it. Cause if you're just sending someone a link that's like new blog : and then the name of it, like that's not going to make them read it.
No. And why should they? Like I know that kind of thing is very frustrating. So I think it's just switching the lens, right? So it's like, I'm not emailing you to get you to do this thing for me. I'm emailing you to help you. So like, if you want to link to a blog, right? Take a point out of that blog. Say you have 3 things you share, take one of them, put it in the email. Like, hey, want to know this about writing emails? Like you should add value. And then you can link to the blog post. Like after you've shared some of the information, then someone's actually learning, they've gotten something, then they're a lot more willing, right? And a lot more likely to then give back and click the link, because asking someone to read your blog is an ask. And I always say like, follow the 80-20 rule, right? Like 80% of your emails should be giving and 20% should be asking or selling. Yeah.
I feel like when you and I have worked on emails that come out weekly to my email list, we focus on that really well of like, there are emails in there that are like more direct pitches, so to speak, but then it's really well balanced with like value add emails that are like podcast content, blog content, all of that. Yeah, I love that, of teaching helpful info. And one example I want to give of that again, another thing we worked on together, but of like adding value was, you might not remember this even, but in the Black Friday emails, I think it was on probably the one that was like the day or two before Thanksgiving, but we put a link to my favorite apple pie recipe. And it like started the email with like, if you're cooking, like I'm cooking today, here's what I'm cooking, here's the link. And then it went into stuff about the sale, and people actually did like click on the link, you know? So that's cool.
Yeah. And it builds that personal connection too, right? Like email can sometimes feel a little less, like a little more removed sometimes than other ways we communicate with people. But when you do something like that, like, hey, I've got my hands like in this pie dough and like, here's the recipe I'm making, and someone can share that experience, that just builds that genuine trust factor. Like it's real. It's not artificial. It's not, forced. It's really like we're sharing this experience or having this value. I think that stuff is really cool.
Yeah, it makes reading emails more fun. It makes writing them more fun, all of it. Okay. Yeah. So that's the third tip, is adding value. Okay. And I like this fourth one a lot. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I always, I work with people, right? Like one-on-one, and also in my group program about like improving your writing skills. And the one thing I always tell people when it comes to emails is find your style and mostly stick with it. So I'm a storyteller emailer. Like that's my thing. If you've ever gotten an email from me, like, that there's almost always a story involved. I have plenty of clients who are like, I know you write stories. I know they're great, but like, that's not me. Like I want a bulleted list, right? Like I just want the information. So maybe you're like a bulleted list kind of person. Maybe you don't love writing and you want to put like a video. So like your thing is you send an email, right, with like a quick synopsis, and then you have a video where you're sharing the content. The other one, I call it like the excited style, but like people send emails with like a lot of formatting. So it'll be like underlines and italics and bolds, and you can go overboard with that, but it also can be really effective. So whatever your style is, it helps people kind of know what to expect from you. So like when I send an email, 85 to 90% of the time, the first two paragraphs are a story. Then there's like a GIF. It's usually Schitt's Creek, like maybe Mean Girls. And then there's like the connection point. So like the business part is under it. And that's just like my format. So people know, like, if they like my story, great, they can read it. If they just want the information, they know where to scroll for that. And it just kind of helps you kind of have first of all, it takes a lot of the work out, because you don't have to write. When I sit down to write an email, I know my basic format. Like I know how it's going to go. And you can always mix it up. Like there's times I don't tell a story, right? Like maybe it's a shorter, you can mix and match, but I think having like your general style is a really good way to stand out and have people recognize your emails, because that's what you want. You want people like looking forward to your emails and knowing what to expect.
Yeah. And like you said, like because of the formatting, they could be like, I want to hear the story. I want to hear the business tips. I want to see what GIFs she's using to like go with it all. I really love that. And I feel like one thing that my weekly emails at least have like a habit of, and I was doing this before we worked together, but you even like incorporated it really beautifully, I think, is like having the little list at the end of like things I'm loving that is sometimes business related, sometimes related to the email itself, sometimes unrelated. But that I've seen that as like a style piece, I guess you could say.
That's a great one to mention. Yes. And I love when I get emails that have those, I look forward to them, because I'm like, ooh, what are they going to talk about? And sometimes it applies, and sometimes, I'm like, pass. But knowing, right, that there's that certain element you can look forward to.
Yeah. And for someone who's like, okay, I get that there's like storytelling, there's lists, video, all those things. Like, how would you tell someone who's writing their own emails and maybe is like, I don't know my style? Like, what are some tips for finding their own style and their own brand voice?
That's a good question. So I would just try different things and see what, like, commit for maybe like a month. Like, I'm going to write only storytelling emails, and then do it and see how it feels. And if you hate it and it's a chore, that's not for you, right? Try just doing like bullets. Be like a little extreme, like give yourself little mini, I don't know. I always test things in my business, especially in email marketing. Like, I'm going to try this for a month. Check your open rates, right? See how your audience responds to it. That's not like a concrete answer, but it's insight, right, into who's opening. But yeah, I think just try it. See what feels the most like you. And maybe it's a hybrid. Like there's not rules, right? Like maybe mine's a hybrid. I do a story and almost always like a bulleted or numbered list below it with my points. So like that's a hybrid style I just made up myself. So just try it out and like see what works and what feels right.
I love that. And another question with that one. With story, I know what you mean by story because I also really like telling stories. I love story-driven emails. But for someone who's like, what do you mean? Like, is it a story about business? Is it a story about my personal life that ties to business? Like, how would you describe for people who are business owners, like what a story email should look like?
That is such a good question. Okay, so the story can really be about anything. I've written stories about like embarrassing things that happened to me in middle school. I've written stories about like jumping out of an airplane. I've written stories about things that happened in my business. So it's not the content of the story that's important. What really matters is the segue or like the connection. So it has to have a direct connection to your point. So for example, if I were going to tell a story about like skydiving, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm standing on the edge of the plane, like everyone else is gone. I'm the last person. And like, I was so scared. Like the guy kind of pushed me. I kind of stepped out. It was terrifying. And then it was exhilarating and like awesome. And, you know, it's the best ride ever, like on the way down. Nobody cares about that, right? Like that's not a thing people really care about unless I can connect it to business. So then I can be like, so your segue is what connects it, right? So I'll be like, just like in business, when we're scared to take that first step, like we have to push through the fear, jump out of the plane and just do the thing. And then here's like the business thing that happens after, right? So you have to have that really strong connection. Otherwise it's just a random story that like random people on the internet probably don't care about.
I love that way of explaining it. I'm totally with you. And okay, something I don't know if I've said it on this podcast or if it's just something I do or if I've told friends this or what, but like something I do is I keep a rolling list on my phone of random stories that I could pull in for examples of things like kind of analogies for things in business, or that I'm just like, that's a good random story that could be incorporated into something like an email. And it really is fascinating because so much of it can even be like super mundane stuff that then connects. Like one that we wrote was, and I told you the story and I was like, okay, how can we like put this in? But was about me not registering my car for 2 years. And then going in to register it thinking like, okay, I'm gonna have to back pay. They're going to be mad at me. And the person didn't make me back pay. And then we were talking about like not following the rules in business. And it was like, just that story itself only took like a paragraph to even tell. Cause it's not like I literally just told it in like 3 sentences just now. Like that's the whole story. But that like, it's so interesting. Like I think it's fun too, to start with like the juicy point of the story and then kind of back it up to the beginning. So it's like, it starts with like, I hate following rules. I waited 2 years to do my car registration. Then you tell the rest.
Yeah. But that's a perfect example of like, why those random things are so helpful. And I love like I keep a list as well, because you just never know. It's hard to come up with those off the top of your head. But yeah, having a list. And then, yes, I love starting like with the most shocking part, or like really pulling people in, right? And just like you're entertaining. And then once they're in the story and you connect it well, if you don't have that segue, even if you tell an awesome story, when they move to the business part, they're going to be like, okay, what? Like, cool, Elizabeth, glad you didn't register your car, but like, what does that have to do with me? So that's why that connector is so important, because that's how you keep people, you get them really engaged. They're super entertained, and then they move seamlessly into like the value part. And if you don't do that, then it's just two separate things that are very confusing.
Yeah. So that's a good thing to clarify. Yeah. That we have to have the segue. And I think like too, if that feels overwhelming to people, something that's helped me is like starting with an Instagram post of like telling the story, making a quick business point with it, and then taking it further into an email later. There actually are some that we've used in my emails that were originally Instagram post stories. And that can be like a maybe less intimidating way to even start it. But obviously like emails don't have to be intimidating either. But I found that helpful to me of like just a little bit and then expanding it further in email.
Yeah, I think that's really smart too, because there's like not a lot of pressure with the social media caption, right? And you have to be concise, because the other thing that can happen with storytelling is like people get off on a tangent and they start describing, right? You get really into it and you're like talking about all these things that don't actually like drive the point of the story. And you can't do that in an Instagram caption because you only have so many characters. So I think that's a great place to start. Yeah.
Okay. Love that. Yeah. So that's the fourth one. Find your style, stick to it, and exploring those different styles, like Emily says, can be really smart. Okay. Let's talk about that fifth tip.
All right. So this applies really to any copy that you ever write. And the copyright is just the words on the page. So anytime you're writing for your business, but specifically with emails, have a really solid why. So if you ask yourself, like, why am I sending this email? And the answer is because it's Tuesday and I send emails on Tuesday. Like that, don't send that email. Please just don't. Like you need to have a really good reason for sending it. Like that goes back to the value, right? But, and like also just respecting people's time and respecting people's inboxes and being like, okay, I'm going to send this email for a reason and not just because it's Tuesday or because I want them to read my blog. Like those are not good reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. And that's where I think when we feel that obligation is when writing the email feels harder, because then we're like, well, we always do it on Tuesdays or Wednesdays or whatever. And now I don't have anything to say this week. And that's why I got into a habit of not emailing at all for a long time. Cause I was like, I don't have anything to say this week. Like I said on my podcast, just let me be.
Just listen to my podcast. Yeah. No, it's very true. When it feels like an obligation, you're not going to be creative and you're not going to really feel, authentic. And I think that's a really important part of email marketing in general.
Yeah. And like you said, too, copywriting in general, I mean, the same goes true for like our website copy. Like if it doesn't actually need to be there, like don't put it there.
Yes. Amen.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love all those tips. So I know I have some like a lot of these connect. I have more questions for you I want us to go over, but some of these connect to like some of what we already talked about. Some of them are more like just more email marketing stuff. But one question I had for you, well, actually, okay, let's start with this one. What is your best tip for making an email fun? Even a sales email, even like a please listen to my podcast, please read my blog email. How do we spice it up? Because like really, it's funny. Like I feel like I've said spice it up to you so many times. I'm like, I email you and I'm like, can you help me spice this up? And that's literally what I said for like the booked out designer sales page. Like I wrote a lot of it and then was like, can you spice it up? So how do we spice stuff up and make it fun?
Maybe that should be my new tagline. Like, let me spice it up.
I mean, it could be. That's like my language I think about with like improving copy is making it spicy.
Yeah, right? I love it. Okay. So honestly, it comes back to just knowing your brand voice and being really just confident in being authentic. So emails are more fun when you write them like you're writing to a friend. So I always tell people like, envision an actual person who who like hopefully fits into your ideal client, like, box essentially, but someone that is a real person, and write that email to them. Because if I was going to sit down and write you, I've written you plenty of emails. There's a lot of exclamation marks. Like it's not very formal, right? There's probably some run-on sentences. But like, that's how our emails should feel. So like, we want our emails to feel like they're coming from a friend. So there's a lot of ways to do that. First of all, loosen up. So write to one person, imagine you're writing to them and just kind of like relax. Also, I'm a big fan of adding GIFs or memes. Those to me are like the easiest way to make something fun, especially when they connect really well. Like that's always like the best feeling when you get one where you're like, yes, this is perfect. Telling stories is another way to do it. Also just like using the slang you would use. So like, instead of like, if you would walk up, like if I would walk up to you and be like, hey, I'm going to go to the store. Do you need anything? Like when I write an email, I should be talking like that, right? Like, hey, I'm going to launch this new thing. Like, what do y'all think? Like, that's how I would talk. And so an email is just going to be more engaging. And then I think too, like adding funny PSs can be really fun. So I'm a big fan of the PS. I know you use PS sometimes in your emails too. Sometimes I like sum up, right? If it's like a long one, I'll have like a, oh, you couldn't read all those words, could you? Like, here's the short synopsis. But you can also like put funny things in there. I've seen people like link to embarrassing photos or like, I don't know, just like be silly with it. Whatever is if you wouldn't make a joke in real life, don't try it in an email. It won't come off right. But if you would, if that's your brand voice, right? Like just find whatever your authentic voice is and relax into it.
Yeah. I love the advice about using slang. And I think that's hard for me to do in emails because even if I think it that way, my immediate reaction is to put like you all instead of y'all, or like instead of gonna, going to. But then when I read it, I'm like, okay, all of a sudden I sound so formal when I'm actually in this specific circumstance, not trying to sound that formal. And there are emails we send, like when you're sending like a contract to a potential client, like you don't want to say, I'm gonna do that project for you. No. It's like, you want to say, I'm going to, it's like, It's different circumstances. But yeah, like for these kinds of emails, we want to feel friendly. And for most people listening, their businesses are the kind where they are going to want their emails to feel friendly. Obviously, like there are certain industries where that's not the case and you do want more formal emails, but that's not really like who we're even thinking about right now as we talk about this. So yeah,
that's a really good point. And it doesn't like come naturally to a lot of us. I mean, I think email is a business form of communication. So, I think especially if we grew up only seeing email used for business purposes, or like, oh, we only like, I only got emails like from my college, like my friends weren't emailing me. Like that wasn't a thing that was happening. Right. But like, you can actually go back and correct for that. So if like, hey, I want this to sound relaxed and you have a hard time, just write it the way you do and then go back and specifically like those words, right? That like gonna, lemmy, like want to, I don't know. There's a lot of them. And then also just contractions in general. So if you say like, you will love this, like change that to you'll, like, YOU''. Contractions are, because we're taught, right, in English class. I mean, I have a master's degree in English, so like you don't use contractions, and that's a really hard habit to break. So you can actually just like give yourself a little note and spend 3 minutes, right? Go back through it and make the changes after you've written.
Yeah, I love that. And that's true. Like because if you put too much pressure on yourself while you're writing, it's like you're never going to be able to write it. So like just write it how you're going to write it and then edit it.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay. And this relates to that question, but subject lines. So like, I love your subject lines. You're great at coming up with, ones that like really do make people want to open the email and create like excitement, anticipation. What's the word I'm looking for? Like curiosity is what I think that's what I'm looking for. But like, what are some tips you'd give for like coming up with subject lines and maybe some do's and don'ts even that we should know about picking them?
Oh, yes. Subject lines are a beast unto themselves. One thing I do sometimes is I just write the first thing that comes to mind, which is usually really bad. So I'll write it and it'll be like, this is a sale, right? Like it'll be like really straightforward. Like the biggest problem people have with subject lines is writing things that are summaries. You don't ever want to summarize what's in the email in the subject line because you de-incentivize anyone from having to open it, right?
That's
like
a good point.
They already know. And then they can decide like, is this for me or not? And you don't want them making that decision. You want them reading it and then making that decision. So start with like whatever it is and think about go look at it and be like, how can I make this a question? Right? Like questions do super well. How could I create curiosity is the exact right word. Like, how do I create a curiosity gap? So instead of being like, this banana is yellow, like be like, what color is this fruit? I mean, that's like a silly example, right? But like, that's a big difference. Like they're going to be like, well, what fruit, what color is it? I don't know. I have to know because our brains, right, are programmed to like need answers to questions. So I think anytime, and then like maybe you write a subject line and you just take one word out of it, but you can create that curiosity from really like anything like, can you believe she said this? Instead of like, can you believe she loved this project? It's like, can you believe she said this? And then people are like, well, what'd she say? Instead of being like, oh, well, she loved it. That's like a raving client review. Cool. Move on.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a great example. Like if the subject line is like, my clients love me, here's a testimonial. It's like, well, cool. But it's like, if I can't believe she said this, it's like, yeah, that is very enticing to open.
Yeah. And you have to be careful with it. Like I do always tell people like the subject of your email should tie in it can be very loose, but it should tie in some way to the content. So like I got an email the other day that was like, job offer for you, Emily, which like was fake personalized, which that's a whole nother thing. But like I opened it, it had nothing, like it was a sales email that had nothing to do. I knew, and I was like, well, what is this? Right. But like, that's really kind of sleazy.
Yes. Clickbait-esque. Yeah.
Exactly. So like, I don't know. My second most opened subject line for my emails is butter a carb, which is from Mean Girls.
Yeah.
It's like a quote, but when you open the email, it's not about butter being a carb, obviously, but there's a Mean Girls GIF and it like connects to the content. So there's like a loose connection. But if you do that, I think you can get really creative. You just don't want to, be clickbaity or sleazy.
Yeah. And how long would you say the subject line should be? Like, are there any, like, is there a length that starts to be too long?
Yeah, I don't know exactly, like off the top of my head, how many characters it is, but really like a short sentence. I wouldn't do much more than like 10 words probably. I mean, unless they're all really long words, then maybe fewer. But if you ever wonder, just send it to yourself and see how it looks in your browser. Most people, well, it depends on your email list. If people open it in their phones, they're going to see a different amount, but you want it to be short enough to be read.
Yeah, to be able to read the whole subject line.
Yeah, so you want the whole thing.
Yeah, that is hard because depending, like if you're using Gmail, it'll put like a lot. But you're right that like on a phone, it might not. And on the software we use for emails, it cuts off a lot there too.
Yeah.
And I like too that what's the thing called where it's like the first line being customized?
The preview text.
Preview text, yes. What's your thoughts on that and like advice there?
Yeah, I love preview text. So some email services won't let you customize it, and they'll just put the first line of text that appears in the email. But in a lot of places you can customize it, and it's just like another place to have fun. So sometimes I'll customize my preview text and have it like, sometimes it gives like more information, right? But other times it's just like, I don't know, like Beyonce lyrics or something that like play off the title. I've done all kinds of things, but it's just like another way to add personalization and to encourage people to open it. Yeah, but they don't have to be connected. Sometimes people think like your subject line has to like lead into your preview text, but like that's not necessary.
Okay. Yeah. And to clarify too what preview text is, it's like whenever you're thinking about opening the email, most email providers will show you like the first couple words of the email. So you could make it not those and make it preview text. And for me, I use ConvertKit, and there's not an option to like go in there and put your preview text, but there is a way to like code it into the emails, which is what we do, in order to like make it the preview text instead, which I like doing that because a lot of times I am like the first sentence of the email would not necessarily make you want to read it. And so it's like, that's helpful to have, or if the first line's like a GIF even, like it's like that can mess with there just being no preview text unless you're customizing it.
It can, or I've actually seen this happen too. So this is a time to really pay attention. If the body of your email is like a graphic, and then the first line of text is sometimes unsubscribe, like the unsubscribe notice. And so then you're getting the email that literally says like, I had to like email the person. I was like, you might want to know about this. But it was like the first line was literally like unsubscribe here, which you don't want that being top of mind. So
yeah. And that's okay. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like using all image in the email? Like, cause I know a lot of larger companies do that for formatting, but I guess they're using alt text probably.
I don't love it, to be honest. I really do like simple emails. So specifically if people are opening them on a mobile, like on your phone, and there's a lot going on, like that's overwhelming. I like to stick with, like a logo at the top, text, a GIF here and there, and mostly text. So that's how
I'm with you. And you're okay. You're like speaking my language with that. And I mean, I feel like I knew that we were on the same page with that. But okay, this will be the last question on copywriting. Then we'll go into rapid fire stuff. But with that, I think a lot of business owners, especially people who are creatives, feel like their emails need to be super designed, like super formatted, tons of like image on the left, a really cool font, and then like another image on the right. Like, do you think that helps conversions? Like, have you seen that help or hurt, or like, what are your thoughts on that versus more text-based emails?
Yes. So my thoughts on that are it's kind of a waste of time. It's off-putting to some people, and it just looks more like a business, like a email you would get from a business, like a, you know, a large business, like they send out, right? Like, I don't know, Ann Taylor like sends you a thing, or Target ad, like they kind of look like ads. And so I really don't like them. I really don't suggest it, because all of I could see it working. Like if you're a graphic designer and you want to send an email showing like a skill you have, and you're talking about it, and you want to put an example, right? Like, oh, I can do this or whatever, like that, I think is fine. Like you can include graphics, and you can even, you know, drop a video, but I would say keep it. And I think I use Flowdesk and I love Flowdesk, but they have very complex templates. And I think that's, a lot of people have started using it and they're like just going wild. Yep. And like using all of the features. I think simple is better. It just makes it helps people focus on your words, right? All that other stuff is going to distract, unless it's done super well. But most of the time I see it, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like I agree with everything you just said. And there's like a balance to it. Like you can use some of those cool things Flowdesk lets you do and not overdo it. But I think a lot of people are feeling that email marketing is more daunting than it has to be, because they're spending so much time picking out the font and the layout and things like that. It's like, if we look at like, this is what made me land ultimately on like deciding I don't want to do emails like that, is like when I think about top marketers in all like online business and so many other industries, they are sending boring looking text-based emails. Yep. And mine are like less boring looking than theirs. But if we look at someone even like Amy Porterfield, who, you know, is an amazing online marketer, her emails are literally text and sometimes a GIF. And it's like, yes, she's not making them these really cool fonts and images. And like, of course she includes images sometimes, I'm sure. I don't get her emails as much as I used to, I don't think. But that's like an example to me of like, it doesn't have to be super designy to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if that's what's stopping you, especially like that's what's stopping you from communicating with your email list, like just start sending like a paragraph. Like it doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be designed. People are really just, if they're going to read it, they want the information. So yeah.
Cool. I'm glad we talked about that part. I wasn't even thinking that question until we were kind of like, when you said something, I was like, yeah, that's like something I think so many people struggle with. Okay. I could keep asking you more and more questions, honestly, but I will stop us on the copywriting stuff there. Some of these last questions still relate to copywriting, but I have a few like rapid fire questions for you to close us out. 3 different questions actually. And I want you to tell everyone where they can connect with you. But first question, you're an M-Shop customer. That's really how we originally connected. I mean, you had bought a template and then we were both at a baby shower together.
Oh yeah.
And for a friend, which was so fun. And then we like talked about it. Or had you already bought a template then? You might not have. You have one after that.
I had. I think it was after, because it was funny because, oh my gosh, that's so funny. I heard you talking and I listened to the podcast and I was like, that voice sounds really familiar. And I was like looking around, I was like, oh, I kind of know her. That's so funny.
I know. I was so glad we got to talk at that shower too. That was fun.
Yeah.
So then I guess it was after that then that you bought a template, but that was where I was like first put on your radar at that baby shower. And then I saw you buy a template and then I was like, oh yeah, she's an awesome copywriter. I need to work with her. But anyway, back to like the template part. My question for you was, for someone who's thinking about an M-Shop template, what advice like would you give them? Like what's your feedback there for someone thinking about it?
Oh, so many things. Just do it. That's like, just buy it. I waited, like I wanted one and I was like, I'm going to be really, smart. And I'm going to think about it. I'm going to look at it. And then I was just like, no, I'm just buying it. So I think the thing that's best about the templates is how you have, like, it's just very obvious that there's strategy. So I love how, like, they're gorgeous. I have the Sophie template, which I was like obsessed with from the beginning. They're really pretty, but a lot of templates, like, that's what you get, right? Is it's really pretty and it's a basic layout. The number of website copy clients, people who come to me and like want me to write their copy, every single person is like, I'm obsessed with your website. I want this section. I want this section. I'm like, well, that was the template. Like I just filled it in, right? But they really are designed. And if copy is hard for you and you're right? You're not a copywriter. You're not super excited about writing an entire website. It really is easy. Like it really is laid out to be like, here's what needs to go here, right? Like the design actually informs the copy. And I think that's why I was like so sold, because I think a lot of times it's design or copy, and with your templates, like they're very much informing each other. It just makes writing it made writing mine easier. So.
Oh, I love that feedback. Thank you. And I love your website. I've loved it for like the first time I saw it. And I was like, oh, that's so fun. And I feel like your website really does like show your services and products and all that really well. So, okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. The next two questions I have: favorite business book or copywriting book, or just a random book. If you have, I know you studied books and were writing about books in your graduate program. So what like book suggestions do you have for us?
Yes. Most of my non-business books would be very like, y'all would be like, no, we're not interested in reading these books from the 18th century. But my favorite business book lately is Originals. It's by Adam Grant. And it's really just like how I think that's the tagline, is like how nonconformists move the world. And it's really cool because it's a bunch of case studies and like looking at actual businesses. Like they look at Warby Parker, who sell like glasses online, and some other notable companies, and really how like being original and being creative and like being willing to break the rules in really smart ways. So it's not like we don't just, being a nonconformist for the sake of not doing what everyone else is doing, but having like kind of a reason and being like willing to follow your creative intuition. And it's been very fascinating.
Oh, I'm going to check that out. That sounds like a great book.
Yeah, I really
love that. And I've heard of him before.
Yeah, he's written
books, but
I think this is not his first book, but
yeah,
it's just really fun. And then I also, let's see, I go back to Atomic Habits a lot. I'll just reread sections. I think that's just like a really applicable, like it's really easy to apply. Like I love, it's not like these grand schemes. It's literally like, here's how to habit stack. And I like things like that where you can actually increase your productivity really simply.
I love that book too. I need to revisit that book because I listened to it as an audiobook, which it's a great audiobook. He reads it himself and is very like casual in the way he reads it. But yeah, I agree. I love that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Your favorite productivity hack that helps you stay focused when you're working?
Okay. So I have a really hard time staying focused. So I've tried a lot of things and not a lot has worked, but there's two things that are like, if I have a big project and I have to like sit down, I mean, I have a 3-year-old who's at home with me all the time. So it's not like I can really focus for more than like her nap time. But when I do that, Pomodoro method is really like the go-to, right? So like you work for 25 minutes and you take a couple minute break, like a 2-minute. I don't know if I do it right. This is how I do it. Work for 25 minutes, set a timer. When it goes off, I like get up, I'll walk around, like look out my window, just like take a 2-minute break and then sit down. And then after 4 of those, you take like a 20 or 30-minute break. And that's really helpful. Also white noise. So
like a white noise maker in your
actually
office?
These like my noise canceling headphones. Yeah. Okay. And I just put them in and then I turn white noise on YouTube. It's like 5 hour. I discovered it when my child was a newborn and we lived in a tiny apartment and had no white noise machine. I found this channel on YouTube that would play white noise for like 5 hours. That's what I listened to. Yeah.
I love that. Those are great. I've done I never know how to say that word, Pomodoro method.
That's how I say it.
Yeah. I haven't. It's for people who want like an app version. There's an app called Focus Keeper. Have you ever used that one?
No, but that's cool.
It does it for you. So you just play and then it tells you when to break and whatnot. But you have to pay to customize it though. So it's 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off, unless you pay, which I've not done. So I can only do that one way. But okay. I love those tips. Well, this has been awesome. Okay. Tell everyone where they can connect with you and see all the cool stuff you're doing and work with you if they would like to and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So I'm usually on Instagram at Emily Writes Well. That's like where I hang out. My website, if you want to see one of Elizabeth's templates in action, is emilywriteswell.com. Yeah, I think I have a really cool, I'm saying this, but it is actually really cool. One of my main like lead magnet freebie, whatever you want to call it, is just linked in my Instagram bio, but it's a brand voice guide that is very unlike anything I've ever seen. And it actually like walks you through this whole, like, you kind of have to print it off and like actually write it. I mean, you could write it in a notebook, but you kind of have to do it. Like there's some work involved. It's probably like a half hour, but it really helps you get super clear on understanding like your brand voice and what that, like how to describe it. And I actually like go through it every like 6 months or so just to kind of like polish and refine. So even for people who are like, oh yeah, I've got my brand voice, it can be really helpful. So yeah, that's there. And the Copy Party Academy. So if you are like listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to write. If you want to outsource, come to me. Awesome. I've got you covered. But if you really want to learn the skills yourself, I teach, it's like a course group program hybrid where we actually learn professional copywriting skills. And so the founding member group is going right now. We've got some really awesome people. It's been really fun. Like we have group calls every week where we do mini trainings and answer questions. And then the course is self-guided. But it's a really cool way to improve your own copy skills. And that'll open back up in June. So
love it. Love it. Okay. And we'll link to that and we'll link to the freebie in the show notes. I feel like I need to go through your freebie because I don't explore that often of like evaluating my brand voice over and over again. I love how you said you go through it periodically.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's something, right, when we're all starting our business, like we all think about it, you hear everybody talk about it and you kind of have like a rough understanding, but as your business grows and evolves, like your target market changes, your ideal client changes, and how you show up in the world. I mean, it's not going to be like vastly different, but the last time I went through it, I was like, oh, actually, like I've kind of shifted here. And it was just interesting.
Yeah. I love it. Well, this has been so much fun. And I'm sure everyone is going to feel so much more confident writing emails now. I seriously feel like all these tips were super helpful. So thank you for coming on the show. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 at some point to like talk about like website copy more specifically or sales page copy or like another one. But I think emails is such a great place to start and a place that like people are actively working on. So
yes. Yeah. I think too, it's like a quick win, right? You can try some new things, you can practice and you can get better at it really quickly. So it's a great place to start.
I love it. Well, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the podcast this week, friend. I appreciate you being here. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, I want to tell you about something. I would encourage you to check out my website template shop. Over on elizabethmccravey.com, you'll find Show It website templates, and they are easy to use, strategically designed, and created to help you book more clients and customers. Maybe your current website is really boring. I don't know, maybe it is, and maybe you don't want to hurt its feelings, but you know it's true. And your website needs to be strategically and intentionally designed in order for it to convert your viewers into raving customers. And that's what these website templates do on MShop. These are pre-made website templates built for the Show It platform where you can plug and play your content into the template with ease and then get started with a website that is made to actually make you money. Isn't that what we all want, right? So go shop the templates at elizabethmccravey.com/shop. That link is also in the show notes. And don't forget that you can actually subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening so that you never miss an episode. And I would so appreciate it if you left a rating and review for the show on Apple Podcasts, or even just share it with a friend. It's a great way to support the show and then give us your feedback. So thanks so much for listening.